Okay, what I seen when I was growing up was people getting together, mostly on Sunday. Sundays is usually our gathering times. Everyone go to church and then everyone went home, and usually it's families. And in that time, and then when I grew older, we had ball games. About that time, I was about 11, 12. Then it was a later time, and the living part was still the same. We were still self-sufficient, but by that time, everyone started going away from the reserve to be able to earn money to sustain part of because by then the needs were getting a little more than they were when way back when I was little. So they went across the line actually to pick apples, and then as the years came and went, they sent kids off to residential school. And the only time the families really got back together was during the summer when the kids were home from school. And the summers were pretty busy because of haying time. By that time, everyone the Baptiste family had cattle, so there was hay to be cut and hay to be stacked. So all the kids that came back from boarding school, residential school, would help with the stacking, and it was like it was a happy time because all the kids were home and they were all working and they were all swimming, went down the lake swimming, and that's the reason why I thought I missed something by not going to residential school, but I guess it's to each his own. I felt like I was missing something, but I didn't know. But in later years, and then as the years went on, things started developing. First of all, there was a few leases, not many. The first lease was the golf course up here, Cherry Grove. And then a few things went on. Was the right-of-way of the Black Sage Road, which is now Black Sage Road. And that was only, I don't know where the monies to that went, because we only had one little band office. I even think before we had a band office, I think most of the meetings were held at the old school. And then as things started developing, my brother was in the service in the States, Jimmy Stelkaya. Then he came back, and by that time, I would say that was in the 60s and 70s. And he came home out of the Army, and he started looking for things to do, and he did work in the orchards across the line in the States, but then he came home, and they got together, had meetings. That was when they started having meetings, because the needs of the people were greater then, because everyone had families and they needed some income. So they started the first Incomeat Vineyard. Was the first vineyard that was started, and that was it. The reason for the vineyard was to bring home the people that were across the line working in the orchards. So in fact, I think there's still one employee that's alive from that time. And okay, way back when back in the trading days, way back even this uh, we used to, the Okanogans used to trade with the people in the States. They would trade the berries for camas, because camas doesn't grow in this area. In the camas is called Itwa and Tsoholusa. So they'd take the sia down there and they'd trade for Tsoholusa and Itwa. And then that's how the people in the South got the sia, and we got the camas. And talking about food and about different gathering places, when the families went up, and they had one particular place up here would be east, and it's called Fish Lake, Tkoralq, and that's where they all gathered. In their camps is in a circle, but it was quite a big circle, and that's where they each fall they would go, and that was the people where they stocked up on the deer in the fall time. So when they when they hunted, when they killed the first deer, was usually they shared with each other, and then the deer after that was more or less each family for their own selves, because each family had an individual family they had to feed and take care of. Where there were different families like the Stelkayas, the Louis, the Gallaghers, and each one of them had families. So after that, the gatherers, in the food gatherers, when in the spring, when we'd gather food, each family, the workers, would go and have different families had their own gathering places. Like our families had White Lake to gather sia. And my grandmother and my uncle and my mother, Margaret Stelkaya, and my uncle Willie Armstrong, and my grandmother Christine Joseph, we'd all be up there gathering sia. And it was a real fun time, because we got to eat. The kids mostly played, didn't do too much picking. We ate quite a lot sia, and that was one of the best times that I ever remember. And then we'd come home, and of course we'd come home. My grandmother would go back to where she lived, and Uncle would. But that was the way it was way back there in those days. The workers were the food gatherers, and they worked hard, because it was hard. It was work to pick the sia, and it was work to dry the sia, and to clean it and dry it. And it was work when the fish had to be cleaned and scored and dried. It was work to skin the deer and to dry it, cut it up and dry it. So that's how the workers, the food gatherers, and the food gatherers are usually each individual family would do their own thing, because there were workers, and then there was the mediocre ones, and then there were the last ones were what they called Eit-Eit-Mush. Eit-Eit-Mush, that means that's the lazy ones. That's the ones that danced and played all summer, all spring, all summer, all fall. That's the ones that played and never worked, but starved in the wintertime. In the wintertime, Eit-Eit-Eit-Mush would, by the time it got cold, they would circle the camps wherever you'd smell the food, and they didn't feed him. They let that person almost starved to death, and then they fed him. And the reason why they did that was because to teach him a lesson so that next year he would be one of the food gatherers and not be eating. So that was part of the, that's where we get our, it's like a teaching tool. That's some of the teaching things that instead of, it's like living, it's a living teaching tool. I learned as I grew up what was right and what was wrong with inexperience. So that was part of it. It seemed like we went from overnight from the food gathering into this other era where everyone discovered that they needed some kind of an income. They needed money for this and that. So then they started going to the States to work in the apples. So it was just seemed like daylight and dark overnight, that one day you were gathering food, going to sea and going fishing and all that and drying it, and then the next year it just seems like the needs got so, the people changed in such a hurry that I think that comes from the kids going away to school, that they found out they had to do these things, have income when the kids came back so they can buy them clothes because they needed clothes. So it's from one year to the next. To me, it seemed like it was just overnight. And from then, it seemed like it was just routine from year after year, and it just went on from year after year. Everybody in the springtime went to the States, to Orville, to thin apples. In the fall, they had a break there. In the summer, they came home and they put their hay up, and in the fall, they went down and picked apples. Of course, there was that little break in the summer where the kids came home from boarding school, where they had all that fun. But after that, they went back to the States and picked apples and worked in the apples until that was over in about around Christmas. And if some of them were smart, they saved their money. So then that carried them over to the spring. And some of the ones that stayed home still had gardens. And so they were pretty well off until this was just year by year routine till in the 70s, about the 78, early 70s, 60s and 70s. I didn't look at my, when the vineyard, the first vineyard came in effect. And that was what I was telling about earlier when Jimmy still kind of got to be chief. He wanted to bring the people home because their needs were so great, and everyone needed an income because they had children, and they had children in the boarding schools, and they had children here. So that Incomplete Vineyard was started then, and about then, that was the only business that the Osoyoos Indian Band had. There was nothing. For some reason, the orchards here in Canada, the wages were so low that you couldn't afford to work in the orchards here. The wages were low. So they started the vineyard for what they call now economic development. And so everyone worked. To start with, everyone put in their time and never got paid for it. It's just to get the ground ready and plant the vines. And okay, then the vineyard was doing pretty well, and our people starting to come back from the States, and they were all working here. And as the vineyard grew, there were a lot of Indians from Penticton, wherever, that wanted to work there at the vineyard worked. So it wasn't just our Osoyoos Indian Band. So they were doing pretty well, and then they had some money built up, and they built the winery. So that increased. Then that was a good thing for us. But as that was growing, just a little before that, there were other developments, small ones, like the Allen potato farm. They grew potatoes, and there was beef cattle still to sustain the families, and so it seemed like everything was pretty even. But then as things grew, more development, more work, and now all of the Okanagan Nation would benefit from this, because the first priority of all these developments is for the Okanagan First Nations to work, to put them to work first. That's the priority. So I think that's pretty good. And as the leadership from way back, when they used to get together, they'd get together, and from those, Penticton, Vernon, Oliver, they had the first Union BC Chiefs Assembly, I think, in Vancouver. I have a picture of that, which I will share with you one day. All these chiefs that they'd get together, and they'd talk, and I'm quite sure that's where all these ideas of development came, because it was just like an evolution from the time from gathering to picking apples to winery to different developments, that it's all going, that it's evolving, and it's all through leadership. And I think each band within the Okanagan Nation has their own leaders, in which makes things good. Whether it be good or bad, there's always some good and some bad in everything. But if we all work together, which it's always been, and they're doing now, they're working together. Each band, Oliver, Penticton, Vernon, they're all working together to see if they can get together in all these things where they can tell each other. One wanted to start a business where other ones have started and maybe failed, and they could help each other in saying, no, we've tried that already, we'll try something else. So that's the good thing of coming together, of meeting. And I know that I haven't been going to these meetings, but I know that this band and West Bank and Vernon, and we all get together. They all get together, and I only get the tail end of it. But I know through the grapevine what's going on. Okay, my thoughts for the future of the Okanagans are, I think if they keep working together, and in order for the children to keep on advancing in the development and things, is for them to get an education so they can be self-sustaining, and so that they will use their brains, so to speak, to be able to have a happy medium. I know that some want economic development, some don't, but there are enough jobs within the bands, within this area, that there need not be any, what people would call dependence on anything, but be able to sustain their own living, for the people to be able to make a living, which anymore there's hardly any what they call dependency on other than the band. because there is really no sense on dependency if they get education, if they get educated in the ways of to work and advance, because every year it's advancing. In this day and age right now, you can't even do anything with a high school diploma. You have to go higher than that. So I see in the future that with the computer age right now, that everyone will have to strive for a better education, a higher education. And I see in this place where I am, they're doing all right. I think all up and down the valley they're doing really well in being able to sustain themselves like way back when. And in all this, with the education and the higher education and everything, I think the Okanagan people still should strive to keep their language, their culture, and their traditions going. Because without language, there's no culture. In traditions, and I think being brought up with all this, and with the respect as the main thing, I think that still should be taught in order to get as high as higher education within our system. Okay, I think the up and coming young people with the education, higher education and all that they should still maintain their identity as Okanagans and still remember your traditions, your culture, in however you can do it. Strive to, even though that fishing and hunting and berry picking lands are all getting developed and everything, they can't take your language away from you. They can't take your culture. That you develop yourself. It's something that they couldn't take from me. No, and I've sustained my language no matter where I was. My culture, my beliefs, my respect, my everything is all in the whole ball of wax. And you keep your Indianness, as to say. Okay, as I said, don't ever forget your Indianness, because that's where you started from. You originated from being Okanagan and being an Indian. It's from the time that I was telling you about the evolution of where I started from, is from food gathering to working in the States to going through many, many leaders, chiefs, and then to this development, this day and age, developing the vineyards, the evolution from the time I was a kid till right now. I've sustained my Indianness because I can speak my language. And you always remember that when somebody's going to say, you're an Indian, you call yourself an Okanagan, you say yes. They'll ask you, well, what's that? What's that called in Okanagan? So it's good that if people would still keep the language up. The language, the culture is all one. And your traditions, traditionally you do this and you do that in your own family. In our family, it's a tradition that when a child starts walking, the first step they take, a person will throw something that the other person wants through a child's legs, and when the person picks it up on the other side, it's theirs. That's called That's when you throw something as the child is taking the steps. That's a tradition. And there are so many traditions, and each family has a tradition. And the way I'm speaking is I will be speaking to the future generations in their language, their culture. And that's what I hope and pray. That's why I do what I do. I speak at different functions, every meeting. I go with Clarence. He asks me to go. He doesn't like to start a meeting without a prayer, Okanagan. And to each function that we go, it's always different. In my belief, the Kulin Chutin, our Creator, in every meeting that I go to, we don't have a standard prayer. Every meeting and everything that I do, it has its own meaning. So you can't just say a traditional one prayer and do a repetition of one to the other, because each occasion is different. So that's what I do in my Okanaganness. And the language is important. I speak it. And I would be so happy if the future generations from here on, which they are starting to come back now, to keep it up, and we might survive our language anyhow. But don't forget, you always know who you are, where you came from. I always remember where I came from. I know who I am. Why?